Supposed Bible contradiction. At what time was Jesus crucified? The Synoptic Gospels seem to be in agreement on the timeline of what happened the day Jesus died. At about 9 a.m., the third hour, Jesus was crucified. Then darkness fell over the land at about 12 p.m. Then Jesus died at around 3 p.m. or the 9th hour. However, John says Jesus wasn't crucified until after the 6th hour. In John 19:14, it reads it was the 6th hour, and Jesus was still before Pilate. So does John contradict the Synoptics on when Jesus was crucified? Well, the common reply is to assert that John is using the Roman system of timekeeping and counting from midnight instead of from dawn. So it was 6 a.m. when this happened, and John would be in agreement with the Synoptics. But this actually creates more problems than it solves, because the trial of Jesus included several stages, and all the Gospels agree this started once the day began. At night, he was questioned by the high priest and the Sanhedrin, but then all four agree that once the day began, they took him to Pilate. From there, Pilate questioned Jesus, sent him to Herod for questioning, then sent back to Pilate for more questioning. Barabbas is then released, and then Jesus is flogged and mocked, and then sentenced to death. It is very unlikely this all happened within an hour, so John could assert it was about 6 a.m. John is probably referring to around noon, which would allow enough time for the events described to unfold. So why does Mark say this happened 3 hours earlier? Scholar Craig Blomberg has a better idea. Both Mark and John are probably estimating and speaking of time in quarters. With an ancient understanding of time, both would be understood in their culture to be claiming roughly morning or midday. The main problem is we are imposing precise timekeeping expectations on an ancient culture, and this really isn't charitable. It is not like anyone had watches back then to know exactly when these things were happening. So ancient people were very flexible in timekeeping, and an hour could really mean a large span of time. For example, James Ermatinger says, "Modern time is often characterized by both a unit of length and a point in time. An hour is composed of 60 minutes, or a day is 24 hours. These are lengths in time. Saying that it is 3:30 is a point in time. The ancients did not use either term precisely. Rather, they saw time as duration, a short time, or a long time, or no time." He notes the 6th hour was seen as about noon, but J.B. Bury noted the 6th hour was seen as about 11 o'clock our time. The point being made is the ancient cultures really didn't care about precise timing, and referred to units like the 3rd or 6th hour to really mean any time around that time of the day. Days were divided into 12 hours, and people generally rounded to the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th hour. Flavio Conti says, "The Romans did not give time, or to be more precise, the measurement of time, the absolute and authoritative value that we grant it today." In the Gospels and Acts, with a few exceptions, the hours that are most referred to note the time are the 3rd, 6th, and 9th hour. In other words, they tended to round to one of those hours instead of worrying about the exact timing. Thus, Craig Blomberg says, "When one recognizes that the widespread lack of precise timekeeping devices in the ancient world led to the practice of dividing the day into fourths, so that people often did not worry about speaking any more specifically than this, it becomes plausible to interpret Mark's 3rd hour to mean any time between 9 a.m. and noon. John's about the 6th hour will also then refer to some time before midday, perhaps within an hour or so." In other words, the ancient audience would not have cared about precise timekeeping. The message was clear. It was probably around mid-morning when Jesus was sentenced to be crucified. Mark rounds down to the 3rd hour, and John rounds up to the 6th hour. E. Randolph Richards and Brandon J. O'Brien note timekeeping outside of Western cultures is never precise and is always general estimates. The Greeks themselves were more interested in aspects rather than timing. Gerald Borchardt observed this same phenomenon as a missionary among people who do not wear watches, and for whom a designated meeting time of 10 a.m. means sometime in the middle of the day, and it can actually take place not in the morning, but in the early afternoon. Once we leave our modern Western expectations at the door and realize ancient people didn't calculate precise times like we do, We can see within their culture, this would not have been seen as a precise timestamp, but a general time period that an event happened around. Thus, within their cultural context and not ours, there really is no contradiction.